Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, the climate bombshell politicians don't want to even touch because the personal liability now for company directors and also financial stability board, not even the government, leaves no room for climate skeptics. Personal liability for directors up to $200,000 US plus the transition risks of stranded assets. Whatever happened to the 97% consensus dropped to 91% in 2014? Didn't hear about that, did you? And only 67% of meteorologists think that human activity is causing climate change. Only 46% are convinced over the last 50 years it's all been human-driven. We'll take a look at the National Survey of Broadcast Meteorologists. And while you're watching the video, please remember to subscribe to ADAPT 2030. And I'll continue this conversation in episode number 12 on Mini Ice Age Conversations on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Join me there. Sydney Morning Herald picking up a piece, Climate Change and Material Risk for Financial System. Financial Stability Board is doing the government oversight on climate change regulations in the private industry. APRA, which I'm going to reference several times during this video, is the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority. It is a regulator of financial service industry now dictating laws, procedures, on how to move forward with climate change in Australia. This is ridiculous. The politicians aren't even regulating it or talking. They're leaving a financial institution in charge. They're not the only ones. The UK has the Prudential Regulation Authority. Now, Jeffrey Summerhays comes out with the first detailed comments. And I love how is it from a domestic regulator or from them, the domestic regulators, responding to financial risks. They're saying that company directors are going to be held personally liable for the internal risks associated with climate change if these companies don't take action. The APRA leaves no room for climate skeptics, which means they actually deny science, that you're not even allowed to ask for new inputs and new information coming into the climate debate. You're not allowed to even talk about it, according to them. Back to the 1400s. Personal liability for company directors. Anybody in the coal industry, oil industry, you're going to have to be paying fines of about $200,000. And then they boil it down. Some climate risks are directly financial in nature. Of course they are. And the report goes on, it says, almost certain that directors of Australian companies will one day face legal action over climate change. Report continues, and they're talking about transition risks that threaten the finance industry. Specifically how they're going to understand these risks from carbon-intensive or low-carbon-intensive industries. Now, they're going to strand a lot of assets. Say there's a rail line that goes to a coal mine somewhere. The exposure of the banks and the insurers to these stranded assets. They're specifically talking about the reallocation of capital from high-intensive industry that we're used to over the last 50 to 70 years into this brand new windmills, solar panels, etc. And the financial risks with new laws being passed and new technologies coming out being forced down your throat. Now, the carbon capture storage, CSS, they don't even know what the carbon prices are going to be in the CSS scheme of things, but they're forcing it already through regulation. Now, how are you even supposed to do any type of analysis as a company going out 5 years when you don't even know what the pricing of carbon is going to be or how these laws are going to change? So, of course, they're terrified of stranded assets, meaning right down to zero with no possible payback. Wow, talk about crushing companies. The impact on the banks, the markets, the technology, the pricing in it, all of these things are super unknown at the moment. Talking about the physical risks, they're saying, oh, there's rising sea levels and it's going to get hotter and there'll be droughts and the power supply is going to be affected and all these risks. And then what about the transition risk? When we're trying to move from power source A into power source B and suddenly laws passed and said you can no longer dig for coal, and then suddenly everything associated with that coal mine is absolutely valued at zero. What about the oil pipelines? What about the natural gas pipelines? What about the ports? This transition risk is truly an understatement. By just a swath of a pen, they're going to bankrupt entire industries and companies. There needs to be a pushback against this, truly. If you're a stockholder in one of these companies, you need to be writing to your politicians or protesting out there in their sessions to say that this is unacceptable. A financial regulator now dictating what companies can do in a country. It's not even the politicians passing the laws. It's a financial institution, a regulatory board. And then, go right back to the South Australia blackout. The once in a 50-year storm cuts off the entire power supply to the state. Oops, but they need to keep going with renewables. Can't even keep the electricity on, but whoa, we need to transition to this electrical supply that's going to cut out and black out entire regions of a country. Talk about irresponsible. And this is all based on the fraudulent studies. 97% consensus. Hey, wait, that dropped to 91% in 2014, didn't it? Oh, I didn't hear about that in the news. And then all these new papers are coming out. CO2's risen by 110 parts per million since 1750, but humans were only responsible for 17 ppm, or even just barely over 10% of that. And then if you go right over to No Trick Zone, I encourage you to go over here. Look at all these hundreds and hundreds of papers just on how the sun drives the climate. There's almost 1,000 papers on 1970s era cooling when they thought we were entering a mini ice age, on what would happen during that time and how climate would shift and how agriculture would be affected. Then we got all the Climate Gate stories, which is 120 plus Climate Gate reports, investigative journalists there. And then we come down into the scientific papers and the skeptics. Why are the projections for CO2 warming not matching what the IPCC said? These should be called questioning the IPCC narrative papers from 2014, 15, 16. There's more than 2,000 of these asking, why is it not working out the way they had said for these last 25 years? And they're not even giving you a chance. The scientific evidence of climate change is so ingrained that you're not allowed to talk about it, question it, ask for other details or anything. Now, Mish Michaels wanted to clarify the story here. She lost her job as a science reporter, but I wrote to her and she wrote me back and said, hey, I was only there for a very, very short time. So this article, the way it's boiling out, it's not such the scandal that it appears to be in the papers. It's just a lot of meteorologists are now saying that the climate change debate is not exactly what you see with this 97% consensus. Only 46% of all the broadcast meteorologists believe over the last 50 years that the primary result of human activity was the climate change. Just 46%. And then in a different survey by the American Meteorological Society, they could only get up to numbers as high as 67%. Now, wait a second. What happened to this 97%? These are the professionals that see the weather every day, look for the changes, see the weather, yet they're not even nearly convinced that it is man-made. And there's a lot of people out there saying, wait, these computer models that we've been fed just don't match real-world observations. So nearly half the weathercasters, 46%, are convinced over the last 50 years. So this is the National Survey of Broadcast Meteorologists from 2016. Just slightly over half, 54%, think that local climate in their area has changed in the last 50 years due to climate change. What? And let's break it down to I want to show you this report here. Regardless of the cause, do you think climate change is happening? Yes. I'm right in that yes thing too. I guarantee climate change is happening, but not because of CO2. It's because of the effects from the sun and the grand solar minimum and these cyclical patterns of time that all the ancients cataloged. And then it continues. How sure are you that climate change is happening? Well, I'm pretty much in the 100% it's happening. I'm not a climate change denier. I'm just debating the cause of the changes. And here we are. Only 42% are extremely sure that the climate's changing. These are the broadcast meteorologists. This is a shocking report here. No wonder they don't want to talk about it. How's your opinion or position changed? Only 82% really feel that even there's human causes involved in it. And almost 20% feel that they're less convinced now. Where's that 97%? I can't do the math anymore. And then I like how they phrase this question. How sure are you that climate change is not happening? 53% say somewhat sure it's not happening. Wait a minute. Only 5% are extremely sure. That's the complete opposite of the 97% consensus. It's more like 95% consensus or not really sure. And then the best to your knowledge, has the local climate in the area covered in your media market changed in the last 50 years? And the respondents say 54% yes. No, wait, this 97% consensus, it should be at 97, 98, 99% according to the IPCC and all the news releases that we've seen over these last dozens of years. Yet here it is, just barely over half. And then they're asking, do you think over the next 50 years your climate will change? And only 60% say yes. And then they ask them to break it down by the cause of the changes. What do you think the cause is? And only 12%, largely entirely by human activity. 12%. And just for those of you in the social media circles here, this is how they're putting out their feeds and how they're touching with their fan base. How are they disseminating the information? Well, Periscope, that's coming on hot right now. YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, of course, these are all visual mediums. How about Twitter and Facebook? But if you're not into Periscope, you should jump into that one. It's a really cool little instant broadcast app, and it allows you to pretty much become your own live broadcast station. And this is what's taking the steam out of traditional media, is we're all able to report facts on the ground as they're happening real time instantly now by using Periscope. So I would suggest you arm your phone up with Periscope, so if anything's happening in your area, you can press a button, it saves over to Twitter, and if your phone gets lost or stolen or somebody takes it, whatever, your feed still goes up and it saves into Twitter, so it still saves on your timeline. You can still get the video back. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. As you can see, there's a lot of things going on that just don't make sense any longer. We are in Alice in Wonderland, tumbling down the rabbit hole here somehow, with financial regulators dictating the new laws on what can be done in a country in terms of energy. And the actual professionals in the very epicenter of the climate change debate, you saw the numbers. Makes no sense. It's a political agenda, pure and simple, to redistribute wealth and bankrupt companies. And now the consensus is not even close to what we've been told it is. And out of all the videos I've done on my 320 videos so far, this was the one that really woke me up the most as to, wow, we are being lied to left, right, and center. And with these changing times, please jump over to foodforliberty.com. Check out their array of water purification, emergency kits, and different types of seeds and seed packs that they have so you can grow your own gardens, which can keep you and your family in a more self-sustainable environment.